Now, a Nobel Prize winner has been criticised for suggesting women scientists shouldn't work with men. So Tim Hunt said the problem with girls is that you fall in love with them and they cry when you criticise them. He admitted being a chauvinist pig, but does that excuse his comments? Well, with us is columnist and broadcaster Milo Yiannopoulos, as you can see, and also Dr. Emily Grossman, who is a maths and science teacher and tutor. Who'd like to start, Doctor?
I think the issue here is that his comments are irresponsible in an environment where there is such a strong gender imbalance still in the sciences. I work as a teacher and tutor, and I am really passionate about encouraging young women, girls at school, to study science, to go into sciences, and there's still an environment where a lot of young girls still feel that science isn't for them. There's a historical reason for that. Back in the Renaissance time, women were told that their brains were too soft to house a powerful skull, that exercising our brains would shrink our ovaries. We're still coming back from that, and we're in an environment where we're desperately trying to dispel these stereotypes, to dispel the image that science and maths is more for boys than it is for girls. And these types of comments, potentially harmless in terms of intent, are actually really reinforcing these stereotypes that we're trying to get away from in terms of encouraging girls to go into science as a career.
Well, you hear this a lot from scientists. You hear this a lot, in particular, from female scientists. But the fact is that there is some reason to suppose that there is an advantage to being a man in certain subjects. There's reason to suppose that gender essentialism, biological determinism, whatever you want to call it, the fact that there are male brains and female brains, may indeed have some basis in science. Now, this is sort of thrown out of the window completely by feminists and female academics who just refuse to accept that there's any reason whatsoever why there might be a gender imbalance. Two things on that. One, actually the science is very much still out on that. And two, if you look at equality in society, if you look, for example, at Bangladesh versus Norway, what you notice is the number of women in science and technology subjects actually goes down as societies get more equal, because women simply don't make the same choices that female academics and feminists would like them to. Women actually don't want to go into the sciences on the whole, and when they have every option available to them, they tend to choose not to.
I don't think that's the issue. I think it's about confidence. I think women suffer. Again, we're not talking about all women, we're talking about some women, we're talking about some men, from lack of confidence and from something called imposter syndrome, where we attribute our successes to external factors and we lack the confidence to actually believe that we are good enough to do it.
Sorry to interrupt you, but you know, if you're going to get put off a career in science because of an offhand comment from a Nobel Prize winner, how committed were you really in the first place to being a scientist?
I mean, women learn in a very different way. Women learn, again, not all women, but majority of women learn in a way that's supportive, that's nurturing, that's encouraging. I see that in the students that I teach. I see the girls that I teach go into mixed-sex sixth forms and get totally put off because they're in a sink-or-swim environment, they're in a competitive environment, they're too frightened to put up their hands and ask.
So we shouldn't have competitiveness in science. Competitiveness in science is bad. We should segregate the sexes, really. That's what you're saying, isn't it?
Absolutely not.
Much better, in fact, if what Tim Hunt said was exactly true. What you're saying is that gender segregation would be a good thing. You're saying mixed classes, the competitiveness is bad for women. So maybe he's right. Maybe we should separate labs out into female scientists and male scientists. That seems to be what you're saying.
It's important for women to be able to compete in a male environment, but it's important to help those women, to support those women in terms of confidence and in terms of self-belief, because women are more naturally self-reflected. Again, not all women, a lot of men are like this too.
It's sort of a weird sexist position to take, isn't it? So women can't really take it, so we need to be extra specially careful around them.
It's different for gay men and lesbian women?
Well, it's brilliant being a gay man because you can get away with murder. You can do anything. I mean, there's the one respect in which identity politics is brilliant. You know, as a gay man or a lesbian, you can basically get away with murder. You can be bitchy, you can be sarcastic, you can be rude and abusive, and you can do whatever the hell you like, and nobody complains. Women, I think, really, you know, until very recently, until possibly the last half-decade, it was certainly true that women had all kinds of structural disadvantages in society. That simply isn't true anymore. It's not true, for example, when women go for jobs in science, technology and mathematics. You know, a study came out, I think, 2 or 3 weeks ago in the US saying that women have a 2-to-1 advantage over men with the same qualifications because everyone's so desperate to hire women. The reality that people experience, you know, going for jobs and in the working life is actually that women are sort of structurally advantaged, not disadvantaged.
And that's happened very recently. Also to show that out of 65 countries, the UK has the highest discrepancy between confidence amongst boys and girls in terms of how good they feel that they are. Girls are coming out of school and not going into those careers because they feel they're not good enough, they feel they're not welcomed.
But women are in the majority at
those very skills,
the question.
those very qualities that, yes, women do cry. Some women cry. I have cried when I've felt out of my comfort zone, when I have felt afraid. But actually, that didn't make me any less good. I cried when I came out of all my exams at Cambridge, and I did better than the boys. And actually, women cry because they're sensitive. Again, not all women, some women, lots of men too, because they're sensitive, because they're self-reflective, because they're empathic, because they're passionate, and they're willing to take on criticism. They're willing to look at themselves. Excuse me?
So Tim Hunt's right.
He's right that women cry, but the implication that that makes us at a disadvantage, that puts us in as people who shouldn't be going into...
I don't think he made that implication. What he was
saying
is that he finds...
to make that kind of comment in an environment when
he never said that makes women less
competent.
What he said was he finds it personally a distraction. He said that he finds it a distraction in
science. Rather than women.
And he's a silly old man who doesn't understand the latest, the
latest
sort of feminist politics on this. What is he? 73 years old?
We can't expect him.
Right. We can't expect him to be up on the, all of that kind of stuff.
He's in a position of responsibility.
What we're witnessing really is a comment that would be perfectly unobjectionable if it were over the dinner table, or if it was, for example, your own granddad.
It wouldn't be unobjectionable if there were young girls present who were studying maths and science at school. And
Andrew Short has tweeted to say, is it because he's made these comments because, leaning to your point, because he's a septuagenarian and he's from a bygone era, sexism in the modern world has no place, but he is an old man, and so do we have to forgive him?
Of course, I'm not talking about him and his comments as him as a person. I'm talking about what it does in terms of the environment that we're bringing girls up into, and a responsibility that people in positions of authority like he is to actually not perpetuate these negative images about women. It's really damaging when girls do a maths test in an environment where they've been told that they're not going to be as good as girls. If they do a maths test in that environment and they identify themselves as girls, they actually write their name as female on the test, they won't do as well in that environment.
Yeah, but you see, you're conflating two different things. It is true that teachers in general mark boys down, but it's true that in STEM subjects they mark boys up. When you sort of do the blind tests, when teachers know the gender of the person who's studying, boys get mocked up in the sciences.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the stereotype threat, which is when girls identify themselves as being female by writing their own name on the top of the test, they will do worse. It has been shown that they will do worse because they know that they feel that they will probably fail.
Better at university. More girls are going. Well, okay, so we have to ask.
Girls perform better at university.
You have to ask if this is really a problem. More women are going to university. They're getting higher grades at school. They're getting higher grades at university.
20% of all
more women graduate. Women in their 30s earn more than men for the same work in their 30s in the UK and the US now. They are 2 to 1 more likely to get a job with the same qualifications. Where's the structural bias against women here? I don't see the problem here. What I do see, actually, is a very reasonable complaint from a lot of young men, not my generation maybe, I'm sort of 10 years older than them, but from a lot of young men who are going to university, going into the workplace, and they don't recognise the world you're describing, because it's not their experience. When they go for a job, they are discriminated against because people are desperate to hire women. When they go to university, more women are doing better all around them, and they feel as though being held up to feminine standards of behaviour, being whacked on Ritalin because they're too boisterous in the playground, or not getting the same support that women do at university.
Okay, and what about mental health issues that men have?
Would you like to make a final point, and then I'll come to you?
Of all A-level physics students, only 20% are girls. How can you possibly say that we're in an equal environment where girls are coming out and studying science as much as boys are? We are absolutely not, and we need to make sure that girls feel that science is for them and it's not just for boys, and they're not being pushed out of it because of who they are and because they might cry and because they might be self-reflective.
But this is based on an assumption that there ought to be some kind of gender parity. My suggestion is that there isn't. We don't complain when women dominate subjects like nursing. We shouldn't complain when men dominate subjects like physics.
We're going to have to leave it there. We could chat for another hour on this. Milo, Doctor, thank you both very much indeed for joining us here on Sky News. We'll continue this discussion on Twitter. Women should not be in a science lab because they cry and fall in love, says a septuagenarian biochemist. What do you think? You can find out what my guests think on Twitter as well. Dr. Emily Grossman at Nero. Send us your thoughts at Kay Bowley if you would like to. We've got all today's top stories